And it's related to when we both know NVC,
Yeah,
and when, say, my partner is triggered and I can see it, I can even just non-verbally see it. I notice this in my body, this response to his reaction, as this feels like this animal fear, like danger.
yeah,
And I can't really think. It's
yeah,
hard to respond. And I know just holding space for another when they're triggered is very important, and seeing them.
yeah,
But everything in me is like, get away, run away, settle down, my
yeah,
character.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, so, I know tapping and breathing
yeah.
and many techniques. I was just curious, maybe what you had to say about
I think that,
when both
yeah,
triggered, or
what,
one's triggered by the other being triggered.
yeah. I think that this is a really normal and natural response. So, I don't know what your story is, and it's not appropriate for us to go into it too much online because I don't want to expose you online or cause any trauma to you. But so I'll just give examples, like fictional ones that I'm making up. I'm not talking about you as as an example. Like I'm not channeling you in some way and then expressing the answer. But
Okay.
um, so I think it's very normal and natural to have this fear like response. People can have it for different reasons. It's a physiological experience that might that's been um, misassociated with their triggers. So in childhood, it might imply that sort of response that it was very dangerous for you when the other person was triggered. And that could be like really subtle. Somebody else could be triggered and it could be really subtle. So what it does is it like could cause you to overeat as a child, or cause you to, how sometimes children pick hair or something, like just a nervous energy. And you might not even notice that the other one's triggered as such as a child, but it's like a very visceral sensation. So it's no different in a way from if you were out in the middle of the forest and you're suddenly walking along and then suddenly a bear is in front of you. It's kind of like a very similar response. And I think that a lot of us have these responses in relationship, but in different ways. So yours is that it's seen when the other person gets triggered. For another person, it might be, uh, if they feel the other person's not listening to them, because ultimately, if we don't get on in relationship, it means death to us because we're a group animal. So
Mm-hmm.
if they respond, like if your parents respond to you in a really negative way, you could be kicked out, you could be killed. You're so vulnerable and dependent on your parents as a kid. You can't survive alone. Even as an adult, we can't really. There's very few of us that can survive without a group of people around us. We need others to trade with. We can't just go onto a desert island and survive. There's good chances that we'd die. So it's like complete acceptance that this is a very normal. I have these trigger like super strong responses in personal relationships sometimes. So then, like you say, it's great having these techniques of tapping, and if you can, expressing that to the person. But sometimes you're so triggered you can't express to the person that I'm going into fear. Like I'm becoming very afraid now, or I feel very afraid now, or I'm getting like I feel like I'm going to die, because you can't actually physiologically, you're in a freeze, you're in a shutdown or a meltdown, express that. So there's no easy answer to it. Just that with your partner, it sounds like you've both read nonviolent communication, so and you're both into this subject. So it's when you're not feeling triggered, being able to go back and express those moments. What my partner and I do, which is super successful, but it doesn't need to work for you, and it's not one shoe fits all, is that when we're both triggered to a point where we can't talk about it in a calm way, we separate. We don't, and then we come back in a couple of hours, and or the next day or something to the subject and we revisit it. But that's not always possible. For us, that really works. We're able to do that, but it's not always possible that you can do that because you're in shutdown, you're in fear, you're in stress. And so often you want to try to sort it out with the other person. But that really works well for us. And then as soon as the triggers go down, we separate. We're able to communicate so well, validating and listening to each other's feelings, and it just creates more and more intimacy. Like, in a way, if arguments are held correctly, even with each other's really strong triggers, if they're held correctly in that space, even though we separate in that moment, neither of us feel abandoned or rejected. If there was, that wouldn't be the right appropriate response. But we do that and then we come back and we talk about it. It makes you closer and closer. It's like really beautiful trust that can arise. But it takes a while. Like, it took us a long time to be able to negotiate that and come to that conclusion. But the more you can have healthy communications when in trigger, when anger or frustration or fear or anxiety is arising, the more you'll trust the other person, the more the trust grows, the more that communication will be easier because you'll trust what the other person's saying. How does that feel, Erin? And then, sorry, just one more thing. And then at the same time, when you're into non-duality, it's also recognizing in all these situations, even if you're really highly triggered, like that, just having a thought or recognizing that there is also still freedom in my experience, even though it might feel like you don't feel free because there's fear and lots of contraction. There is always freedom when there is when there is the watching there. It's just that there's maybe seeking energy or contraction, so that's not recognized, but just having an acknowledgement of that my freedom isn't in sorting this out. My freedom is always in the watching. But that doesn't mean avoiding these situations. It's just recognizing that simultaneously.
Yeah, that feels really, really helpful and lovely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We usually say, thankfully, we're not always set off at the same time.
Yeah.
So one of us is struggling, usually the other comes in and reminds of, this aliveness, that this freedom is even, as this is being experienced, but helpful to hear that, to remind, just ground in that, the witness.
Yeah.
Paul Hederman, we both love as well. And
yeah, nice.
He said selfing, and so it's like, oh, I'm just selfing so hard right now. It's really great. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Erin. That's lovely to meet you on here.
Yes, great to speak with you. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.